The sound is what I remember first. Not the voices, not the flight announcements, but the hum. A low, industrial, and utterly indifferent hum that vibrated through the polished floors and up into the soles of my feet. It was the sound of a machine that did not care about my existence. I stood at the large panoramic window of Gate B42, Schiphol Airport, my hands resting on the cool glass. Outside, the gray tarmac was crisscrossed with the lights of service vehicles, like busy beetles under a heavy sky. My flight, the one that held my husband of 30 years, my 2 adult children, and all my luggage, was being pushed back from the gate. A giant, silent metal bird, slowly, inexorably, turning its back on me. My phone, clutched so tightly in my palm I feared the screen would crack, buzzed once. Then again. I didn't want to look. I already knew. The message, when I finally forced my eyes to focus, was from my daughter, Sophia. The words were simple, clean, and surgical in their precision. Mom, we talked about it. We thought you'd understand. It's for the best. In that moment, the vast, bustling terminal seemed to shrink, the noise fading into a high-pitched ring in my ears. I was 57 years old, standing in the heart of Europe, and I had just been neatly, calmly, and completely erased by the people I called my family. My life for 3 decades had been a symphony of small, domestic noises. The hiss of the coffee maker at 6 a.m., the gentle thud of the newspaper on the front porch, the frantic zip of backpacks as David and Sophia rushed out the door. I was Carol. Not Carol the aspiring graphic designer, a dream I'd shelved when David was born. Not Carol the lover of 19th century poetry. Just Carol. Mom. Honey. The organizer of birthdays, the finder of lost keys, the keeper of the grocery list. My identity was a comfortable, worn-out sweater woven from their needs. My husband, Mark, was the bold splash of color in our family portrait. Where I was steady, he was spontaneous. Where I planned, he dreamed. He had started a small logistics company from our garage, and through a combination of grit and good timing, had built it into a respectable, profitable business. His success had given us a life I'd never dreamed of as a girl growing up in a modest 2-bedroom house. A 4-bedroom colonial with a garden I tended with love, 2 cars, vacations to the beach. But with that success came a subtle shift. The man who used to ask my opinion on everything from client letters to what color to paint the office began to make unilateral decisions. My contributions to the household, the invisible labor of making a life run smoothly, became the little things you take care of, said with a pat on the head, a benign dismissal. The betrayal, when it came, was executed with a chilling, military precision. Our flight from JFK had been long, and we had an 8-hour layover in Amsterdam before our connection to Florence. We were all frayed at the edges, that particular exhaustion that comes from recycled air and broken sleep. Come on, Mark had said, his arm around my shoulders in a way that felt, in retrospect, more like steering than affection. Let's wait in the lounge. I sprung for membership. We can get a proper meal, maybe even a shower. The lounge was an oasis of quiet luxury. Plush armchairs, soft lighting, a spread of food that looked like a magazine photo. Mark was uncharacteristically generous. Have a glass of wine, Carol, you look tired. He ordered a bottle. David and Sophia joined in, toasting to the trip of a lifetime. The warmth of the alcohol, the comfort of the chair, the relief of being off the plane, it all conspired against me. I remember thinking, this is nice. We're finally connecting. It was the last coherent thought I had before my eyelids grew heavy. I woke with a start, my neck stiff, a line of drool on my chin. The lounge was quieter. The clinking of glasses had ceased. I blinked, disoriented, and looked at the clock on the wall. Our boarding time was in 40 minutes. A wave of panic, sharp and acidic, rose in my throat. Mark's chair was empty. So were David's and Sophia's. My large carry-on tote, the one that held my purse, our passports, and the folder with all our tickets and hotel confirmations, was gone from the space at my feet. Only my small, crossbody purse remained. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a wild, trapped bird. They've just gone to the bathroom. They went to get a magazine. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and scanned the lounge. It was mostly empty, occupied by strangers absorbed in their laptops. I called Mark's phone. It went straight to voicemail. I texted David. Where are you? No response. Sophia. My bag is gone. Where did you go? Nothing. I grabbed my things and half ran, half walked to our gate, B42. The walk felt endless, a nightmare where you run but get nowhere. When I arrived, breathless, the scene was serene. The gate agents were chatting quietly. The screen above their heads was stark, unambiguous. Flight AZ315 to Florence. Gate closed. The first hour was a blur of primal, disorganized terror. I ran from one information desk to another, my voice trembling as I tried to explain that my family, my passport, were on that plane. The airline staff were polite but firm. Without a passport, I could not be allowed through security to the gate, and the plane had already departed. Perhaps you can contact your embassy, a kind-faced woman suggested, her eyes full of a pity that felt like a brand. I was a problem to be managed, a statistic, a stranded senior citizen. I found a hard plastic seat in a crowded part of the terminal and collapsed into it. The reality began to set in, cold and heavy. I was alone. In the Netherlands. I had my wallet, my phone, and a credit card. But my heart medication, the beta blockers I took every day, was in my checked luggage, now soaring over the Alps. A fresh wave of panic, this one physical, clenched my chest. What if I had an episode? Who would know? Who would help? The first night, I used my card to book a room at the dreary, overpriced airport hotel. The room was a box of beige loneliness. The bed was too large, the silence absolute. I ordered a club sandwich from room service because it was the first thing on the menu I recognized. When it arrived, it looked perfect, but each bite was like chewing on cardboard. I left most of it on the plate. Later, I picked up the receipt. 22 euros. For a sandwich I couldn't even eat. I stared at that number, and the tears finally came. Not dramatic, movie tears, but a slow, hot leak of utter despair. This was the cost. This was the value they had placed on me. 22 euros and a sleepless night in a beige room. The next morning, pride began to war with practicality. Mark's lesson included a bank transfer notification. $2,000. It was a king's ransom to the woman I had been, the careful grocery budgeter. It was a pittance to the woman stranded in one of the most expensive cities in the world. It was also an insult. A payoff. He was treating me like a minor business inconvenience. This, more than anything, sparked a small, stubborn flame of anger deep in my gut. It was the first coal of what would become my resolve. I checked out of the hotel and, using my phone, found a small pension in the Jordan district, run by a no-nonsense woman named Ank. The room was tiny, with a slanted ceiling and a shared bathroom down the hall. But it had a small window that looked out onto a canal, and it cost a fraction of the hotel. It was my first real decision, my first step toward reclaiming agency. It felt monumental. For 3 days I became a ghost in Amsterdam. I walked for hours, my feet aching, through markets and over picturesque bridges. But the beauty was a mockery. I saw an elderly couple sharing a pastry, feeding each other bits with laughing eyes, and I had to look away. I saw a young mother scolding her toddler, and my arms ached with the memory of holding my own children. I was an island of grief in a river of happy, normal lives. I checked my phone constantly. The silence from my family was a physical weight. No apologies. No concern. Just the echoing silence of their collective decision. I was not just financially and geographically stranded. I was emotionally marooned. The pressure was building, not with shouts, but with the relentless quiet, forcing me to ask the question. If I was no longer their wife, no longer their mother, then who in God's name was I? On the afternoon of the third day, I found a small bench by the Prinsengracht Canal. The sun was out, dappling the water. For the first time, the beauty didn't hurt. It just was. And in that moment of quiet acceptance, my mind, which had been churning with pain and panic, suddenly stilled and became sharp, analytical. I stopped feeling and started thinking. I went back over the last year. Mark's secretive phone calls. The talks with David about restructuring. His dismissiveness when I asked about our retirement funds. It's all handled, Carol. I've got a new guy, very sharp. We're positioning ourselves for the future. The future. A future that, apparently, didn't include me. Then I remembered the cloud storage. Years ago, I'd insisted we set up a shared family drive to backup photos and important documents. Mark had laughed it off as one of my organizational quirks, but had eventually set it up. I logged in on my phone, my fingers clumsy with a new, cold purpose. I navigated through folders of vacation photos and school reports, a museum of our life together. I searched for files modified in the last 6 months. And then I saw it. Tucked between a scanned copy of our home insurance and David's college transcript was a PDF. It was password protected, but the file name was clear as day. Prenuptial_amendment_2023_Carol.pdf. The world did not tilt this time. It snapped into a terrible, horrifying focus. We did not have a prenuptial agreement. The concept was absurd. We had married with nothing but student debt and hope. Why would this file exist? And why was it amended? My hands were ice cold. I tried every password I could think of, birthdays, anniversaries, the dog's name. Nothing. But it didn't matter. The existence of the file was the key. This wasn't an impulsive act of cruelty. It was a calculated, long-planned financial and legal maneuver. The abandonment at the airport wasn't the betrayal. It was merely the opening gambit. The real game was about money, assets, and cutting me out. The power balance shifted in that single, silent moment on a bench in Amsterdam. I was no longer a discarded wife. I was a party who had just discovered the other side's secret plans. The grief was still a vast ocean inside me, but now I had built a raft. A raft made of cold, hard facts. My plan began not with vengeance but with survival and meticulous, dignified strategy. My first move was to find a pharmacy. Using a translation app and a great deal of hand gestures, I managed to get an appointment with a local doctor. I explained my situation, showed him the label from my old medication bottle on my phone. He was kind, professional, and asked no uncomfortable questions. He wrote me a prescription for a month's supply. Holding that small box of pills was a greater victory than any I had ever known. It was the tangible proof that I could take care of myself. Next, I needed intelligence from the home front. It was the middle of the night back home, but I called my oldest friend, Brenda. We had been friends since college, through marriages, births, and now this. Her voice, thick with sleep, became instantly alert as I spoke, my voice low and steady, recounting the facts without the hysteria I had felt days before. There was a long, stunned silence. Then a whispered, "Those bastards. Those absolute, unmitigated bastards." I talked her through where I hid a spare key, in a fake rock in the garden she'd always teased me about. In the back of my closet on the top shelf, behind the winter blankets, there's a cardboard box. It has old tax returns, bank statements from before we consolidated, and the original deed to the house. My mother's inheritance was part of that down payment. I have copies. Mark doesn't know. While my family was presumably sipping Chianti and admiring the Tuscan hills, my best friend was acting as my operative, gathering the evidence of my financial life. She sent the package via an expensive, guaranteed international courier. The cost was insignificant compared to its value. The final piece was legal counsel. I didn't want a bulldog, a celebrity lawyer who would grandstand. I wanted a surgeon. I spent a day researching and found a family law attorney in my hometown who was described as methodical, unflappable, and fiercely effective. Her name was Sarah Jenkins. I composed a long, detailed, and dispassionate email. I attached photos of the text messages, the bank transfer, the mysterious prenup file name, and a summary of the financial documents Brenda was sending. I presented it not as an emotional plea, but as a case. Her response came within hours. It was just 3 lines, but they were the most powerful words I had read since this nightmare began. "Carol, you have an exceptionally strong case. Do not communicate with them under any circumstances. I will handle everything from here." My quiet countermove was complete. I had secured my health, my evidence, and my champion. The stage was set, and they had no idea the play had even begun. I flew home a week later, a different woman in the same clothes. I did not go to the house I had shared with Mark for 25 years. I went straight to Brenda's spare room, which she had filled with fresh flowers and my favorite tea. The confrontation was not a dramatic scene at the airport. It was a series of quiet, devastating legal documents, served by a process server. They found Mark at his office. The papers were for divorce, yes, but they also included a temporary restraining order freezing all our joint assets and a motion to invalidate any purported prenuptial agreement based on fraud, duress, and forgery. My lawyer, Sarah, had also formally filed a police report for the theft of my passport and abandonment, citing the text messages as evidence of intent. The climax I witnessed was auditory. My phone rang 2 days after I returned. It was Mark. His voice was a jagged mix of fury and sheer, unadulterated shock. "Carol, what the hell is this?" he roared. "Freezing the accounts? A police report? Have you lost your mind? This was supposed to be a lesson." His use of the word lesson was the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. My voice when I replied was calm, flat, the surface of a still lake. "You left me alone in a foreign country without my heart medication, Mark. You stole my passport. That's not a lesson. That's a crime. And that prenuptial agreement you forged? My lawyer is very, very interested in that. She's already engaged a forensic document examiner." The silence on the other end of the line was profound. I could hear his ragged breathing. The bluster was gone, replaced by a dawning, terrifying realization. He had underestimated me. He had thought I would crumble, that I would come crawling back, chastened and compliant. He never imagined I would fight back with such cool, precise force. "David. Sophia." His voice cracked, becoming small and broken. "They won't speak to me. They're blaming me for this mess. The bank called. They've frozen my business line of credit." The consequence had landed not with a bang, but with a series of quiet clicks, of locks, of doors, of keyboards finalizing legal commands. The payoff was the sound of his world. The empire he had built and thought he could control so completely, shuddering to a halt. My revenge was not screaming. It was silence, the law, and the cold, hard truth of his own actions coming home to roost. The aftermath was a long, slow process of untangling two lives that had been woven together for half a lifetime. The divorce proceedings were complex, but my position was unassailable. The forged prenuptial agreement was the final piece of evidence that sealed Mark's fate, proving his malicious intent. It was thrown out by the judge without a second glance. Given the circumstances of egregious marital misconduct and abandonment, the financial settlement was heavily in my favor. I was awarded the house, a significant portion of our savings and investments, and spousal support. Months after the initial papers were filed, David and Sophia began to tentatively reach out. Their apologies were full of excuses. "Dad said you were suffocating him. He told us it was an intervention for your anxiety. We were scared, Mom." It was a painful, messy path toward a new kind of relationship. I listened. I told them I loved them, because a mother's love is a stubborn, deep-rooted thing. But I also laid down new laws. "I forgive you," I said, "but I will never forget. Our relationship will be different now. It will be built on honesty, respect, and boundaries, or it will not be built at all." I did not seek to destroy Mark completely. In the final settlement, I allowed him to keep his business. It was my one act of grace. Not for him, but for me. To prove to myself that my actions were born from a place of self-respect and a demand for justice, not from a desire for vindictive ruin. I refused to let his cruelty turn me cruel. Revenge, I learned, is not about hatred. It is about restoration. It is about reclaiming the power they stole from you and using it to build a new life, a better life, on your own terms. The most profound revenge is not destruction, but a peace they can no longer touch. If this emotional story of betrayal and quiet strength resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own journey or someone you know, please share your thoughts in the comments below. We are a community of stories. Your support through a like or a subscription helps us find and share more real-life stories of resilience. Thank you for listening.